Joining us on ET Now, a very, very special guest today, Commerce and Industry Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman. Thanks very much for being on the show with us, ma'am. From all of us at ET Now, wish you a very happy new year. I'm going to first begin by talking about the pet theme of your government, and of which you are a big custodian, that's Make in India. You've just concluded a dialogue with the states, with the industry. There seems to be a lot of thrust on this pet project for obvious reasons, job generation, all of that. After you've taken stock of this, along with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, all stakeholders on board, are there new challenges that have emerged, and how confident are you now of achieving this goal than you were when this project was actually announced?
I won't say there are new challenges, but certainly I will say we are now with the states on board, clear about the steps that have to be taken both from the center and the states in order to remove the hurdles and make business friendly environment possible. And in that, I'm not saying we've identified challenges alone, but because the way in which this has been gone around, I'm confident, and even as they came in for the discussion, since I found a very constructive engagement, I find states also looking forward to having ways through which they can sooner establish a kind of environment in which investments will come in, feel comfortable and get going. So, it's not just identifying challenges, but being together in identifying and also making sure that quickly and very clearly understanding what is required to be done next.
What are the top areas of concerns that have emerged that after the stakeholders meeting, and which ones will be addressed first?
Well, first of all, I think I'm glad to say that all states, together with the industry, feel that almost all of us know where the problems are. The rigor, the monotony, the kind of residue which prevails in our minds about we have to regulate, we have to control, we also have to make sure that people fall in line in terms of due diligence, is a mindset. And all of us are therefore keen that we work to remove this mindset, and for which of course it's not just a problem of talking with each other, but also making sure that where it can be simplified without a loss of control or loss of understanding what is going on the ground, it is possible. And therefore simplification, getting everything reduced to the minimum requirement. And second, where you knew, typically as they would say, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Many such instances where one department is moving very well and the other doesn't realize that probably there are issues concerning that which is causing interministerial, interdepartmental. So to get cohesiveness and also to ensure that no one is really inadvertently causing delay.
Let me draw your attention to an unnecessary debate that has taken public space on this. I'm sure at one level it amuses you. The Make in India versus Make for India. Some people, including the RBI governor, have voiced concerns on, can the world accommodate another export-led economy like China? Should India at all be going that path? Other economists have turned around and said, why should we push for manufacturing when we are so strong in services? Why not give that a fillip? First, let me just address this Make in India versus Make for India controversy with you.
I do not want to shift the blame, but I'm not sure where this controversy has come from. And I can't see it being a controversy. Somebody who produces to meet Indian demand, the domestic demand, need not necessarily confine himself to producing for India. A domestic producer can also meet domestic demand, post which or during which, along with which he can still export. So, if lines are being drawn, and if lines are drawn with an intention, however purposeful or otherwise, it is to differentiate between producing for India or producing for some other market. I think these are artificial lines. A producer produces for the local market, and many a times that is their bread and butter money. But when a producer is internationally competitive, in the sense its quality is good, price is fair enough, and it gives an advantage for people who want to import from him, he will export also. So these are debates which are as though in a classroom students are made to sit and you belong to this cohort and you can't get into the other cohort kind of a debate. The economy doesn't work like that. Manufacturing doesn't work like that. If you are competitive enough, you're going to compete in the international market. And nothing in our policy can hold that person back from doing it. That's simply it. And the other side of the story is also to say, does this mean that Indian economy's demand is so much that you don't want a producer to look at other options? Even that is unfair.
That's
Why
right.
should we contain anyone's market aspirations? Second. And third, if the value for your production can come from good quality export and you're able to benefit because of the payment and the value for money, you're getting paid in dollars or whatever, why shouldn't it happen? I'm not pushing a manufacturer to say you would produce only for international market and not for India. No way.
That's right.
That itself is a poor reflection of how this government would want to do, and that's not what we want to do.
And a lot of auto companies are doing that. They're making in India, they're also exporting to the
That's
world.
right.
Do you believe it was a little bit of a short-sightedness for the RBI governor to coin that term, make for India, unnecessarily brew that controversy?
Well, I'm not sure he intended to do it. I'm also not sure whether he was pitching for a debate, make for India versus make in India. I'm not sure he pitched for it. But as always with many things, once it comes into the media space, it's interesting to talk about it. So you want this argument versus that argument, and then it becomes definitely two distinctly different arguments.
But on a more serious note, do you believe China is going to recede a little and that will give us some elbow room in the global market? Is that a thinking somewhere on the back of your mind?
Well, there are indications that whether I wouldn't even define it as China receding a bit. I think China probably is facing a situation where the input costs are going up, whether it is because of cost of labor, or whether it is because even though a large quantum of fund is government's own funds, the impact of Taiwan probably not coming in a very big way as they did before, or because even China probably realizes that quality issues are arising. Also, servicing post-marketing is an issue with Chinese products. So there are many things like this. So I won't even want to say China is receding, but I think China is now moving up in the value chain.
Right.
And therefore, we probably will be now facing them on even such sectors like automobiles, where we have reached very high standards. And it is that market, and I think it's good if many sectors, Indian producers, Indian manufacturers have already reached such standards. The competition with China may not be against us. It's probably going to give us a lead advantage.
One of the things that a lot of industry participants who were present in the meeting and people we've been speaking to on and off have cited the cost of credit being a huge deterrent to investments being made in India. From where you see it, because you have the advantage of seeing it from within the government and also from outside because you head the industry ministry. How big a deterrent is cost of credit right now? Is that the only deterrent perhaps?
See, there is a distinct issue of capital outside being available at real cheap rates. And there's also this situation in India where companies which are actually overseas companies having their own subsidiaries here or having companies here in India which benefit from that kind of a credit facility. And therefore, companies which have an overseas base or their the larger group heads are outside,
right,
they are able to access credit at far lesser rate when compared to Indian companies which are essentially situated here and accessing only Indian financial institutions. So yes, cost of capital when compared with companies which are purely in India, which have no access otherwise to external credit, and for companies which have subsidiaries here. And that itself is becoming an issue because wherever you go, like only a week ago I was in the south, issues of capital being unaffordable does come up.
One of the reasons that the RBI cites for not relenting on rates so far is that they want a distinct trend on inflation. Yes, we've been helped very largely by the global fallen crude oil prices. But I have two questions for you. Do you believe the RBI needs to now change its stance? It's been an inflation warrior way too long. Inflation is now on a downward trajectory. And B, are you though at the same time a little apprehensive that we may be celebrating very early? Crude oil prices are very volatile.
Crude oil prices are volatile. No, there's no second argument on that. Inflation has been contained is clearly proving in the way in which you find essential goods being available, your statistics showing very clearly wholesale and retail price index moving favorably for the customers. And government steps to contain inflation have also been periodically publicly reported. So, yes, for me, I want affordable credit. There's no question. I want commerce to pick up. I want trade to pick up. I want manufacturing to pick up. So, I would want access to affordable credit.
You would want Governor Rajal to blink and relent. But a lot of experts are now voicing this opinion, and I'm just going to be the devil's advocate and ask you. Inflation rate management or monetary policy is really the domain of the RBI at one level. And because there's been an open demand, you're not the only minister in New Delhi asking for it, because you see the situation from a growth perspective. Growth is essential, it's non-negotiable. At one level, does this clamor for rate cut from the industry, from the government, undermine the authority or the independence of RBI?
Not at all. You may have a wish list, I may have a wish list, and we also articulate it because it's a free society. And when we articulate it, we give our reasons for it. But that is not imposing on the RBI. It doesn't in any way walk on the toes of the governor. But of course, all of us give our own perspective. Doesn't undermine the authority of the RBI at all.
Let me just switch gears and talk about what's happening back here in New Delhi. Your government has decided to take the ordinance route 6 out of 7 months that it's been in office. While there are investors that cheer this move because they believe the government is not willing to be deterred by what's happening in Parliament, they are willing to go ahead with the reform drive. There are others who believe that this undermines the authority of Parliament. It is, after all, Parliament's job to make laws. I first want you to address the concerns of the lobby that believes that you're undermining the authority of Parliament, and then I'm going to come to the reforms that you want to take.
No, I don't think we are undermining the authority of the Parliament at all, because in the Parliament, in the Lok Sabha and in the Rajya Sabha, the government has repeatedly, the leader of the House in the Lok Sabha and the leader of the House in Rajya Sabha, both of them, the Prime Minister himself and Shri Arun Jaitley in the Rajya Sabha, have not once but several times gotten up to say, look, if there are issues on which you want to have a debate, we are ready for it. And we've repeatedly said, not just on one or the other issue, but on every issue where the demand was to have a debate. Now, with a debate, many things can happen. Facts can come out, arguments from both sides can be placed, and the general public know which way the debate is going, and therefore then they can understand that it has been discussed through public representatives, people's representatives, and therefore the call has been taken. Now, what you've seen, unfortunately, however, is there are some situations, very weird situations, that a position taken in the Lok Sabha by the opposition parties and cleared certain situations doesn't happen when it comes to Rajya Sabha. So, if within the opposition also there is a dichotomy that they behave in one way in the Lok Sabha,
that's
take
because
one
of the arrogance of numbers in one house versus the other.
That's right. And unfortunately, that was an allegation put back to us, saying it could be the same thing in the Lok Sabha. But there, if the numbers will have to vote and will have to speak up, it is the way in which the voters have represented us. So, if voters sending a certain party with a certain number of seats is being called as an arrogance of numbers, I dread to think who is undermining the Parliament.
Okay, but I'm going to still persist on this question because...
and therefore the ordinance route.
Yes.
So, you see, not just the 7 months, but hasn't this country been waiting for reformatory legislations to take place? Legislations which are going to remove obstacles for development take place. Now, more than for 8-9 years, I'm including the period when UPA 2 was in power.
That's right.
Assume that they were intending to bring in bills, whether they brought it or not is obvious, and I wouldn't even want to get into the debate because very clearly many of the bills were not even tabled. But here, The fact is that during that period and now, people's expectation is this country should move forward, many things should happen, reforms should take place, and development should not be denied to the economy.
You know,
now, therefore, if at this stage we are willing to table it and then discuss it and then pass it, but that discussion doesn't take place, are we also going to join this league of governments which have not progressed because they claimed coalition dharma or something else?
Right.
No, certainly we have to therefore go through the ordinance route.
I buy your point, and you know, there are people who appreciate the effort that has been made to go through this ordinance route. The question though is that does the ordinance route, you know, convince investors? Are they going to be convinced to pitch in the money? Because after the land ordinance came out, and I'm not even touching upon the fact that President apparently made some queries on this, what was the urgency? I'm actually asking you the question that we spoke to a lot of industry people, and they all said that they will wait before putting in money. As long as Parliament has not passed the bill, they're going to hold on to their horses, so to say. How will you then convince investors? Is this not being done in haste, so to say?
Not at all. As I said, it is not being done in haste because it's not just our term since May 2014. These are legislations which have been waiting. The economy has been waiting to get this kind of a push for more than now 6-7 years. So I don't think we are doing it in haste, one thing. Second, even before the ordinance, you saw the way in which we've tried to engage with the opposition, saying, please don't stop the passage of bills.
That's right.
If that doesn't move forward, our commitment to such reforms and our commitment to sending a proper message out there to investors, to producers, manufacturers, that we are willing to go this far, we have to bring it through ordinance. And that doesn't preclude or exclude any situation which after a certain period of time, we will certainly go back again. After all, an ordinance will also have to be legislated upon subsequently. Yes. We'll have to go back to the Parliament. We will do that.
I want to specifically talk to you about the auto industry. We've seen a good trend till about November, and which is why the government has decided not to extend auto stops into this new year and, you know, end it on the 31st of December. As somebody who knows the other side of the story also, because you're the industry minister, have we entered that lifeline a little too soon? Could we have waited for at least up until the budget?
Well, every time a call is taken, a lot of factors are looked into. The ministry cannot and will not ever rush into decision making. There are so many sectors which want so many other benefits also to be given to them. So we are periodically reviewing every sector and taking a call. So if every time we take a call, we have to shift it to the next major milepost, which is the budget, it means you're not allowing me to take any decision for 12 months. That's right. So that's not how it works. That's one thing. And that's also to assure different sectors that we don't take off-the-cuff decisions. Inputs are taken from the industry. Input also is taken from within the ministry and other concerned ministries. Then you're looking at the economy as it prevails outside. So a call is taken, keeping all these things in mind. And if withdrawal or SOP is not to damage the industry, but if we think that it can stand alone and compete, why not? So it's not as if you have to give this life support where it is not required.
That's right. And that's a fair point indeed. But the other bit also, ma'am, is that excise duty hikes have happened on petrol and diesel for about 3 times in the last 2.5 months. Are you taxing the oil marketing companies, especially when they just are beginning to feel that crude comfort? I know because the government is under pressure as far as revenues are concerned, tax collection hasn't been so buoyant. But could we have given these oil marketing companies or the exploration firms some more time to leverage the crude comfort, really?
Well, this is not going to damage them. It is more revenue raised, and I think the minister has made it very clear that this is more for raising revenue for infrastructure building. And as you rightly said, how much can the government go on dipping and dipping into one sector which is so critical for development? And the amounts being raised per litre are not really so heavy that the customer cannot. And in a situation where the international market is giving you an advantage, and we are indeed passing that advantage and benefit to the customers. 5 times this government has given the advantage to the customers.
Lowered prices.
Yes, and after which it thinks it needs money for infrastructure, and there we go, we say it openly and then ask for it. We are told, why can't you wait? No, why can't then all of us wait for this government to show its performance.
Right.
That's not how it is. It has to all happen simultaneously.
The one thing that everybody lauds your government for is at least the understanding that why is growth so crucial and why is growth so non-negotiable. I'm going to ask you a very contra question on this, because now that we've been speaking to Finance Ministry officials, Mr. Jaitley himself, Mr. Arvind Subramanian, they all believe that the targets that have been set for fiscal deficit are perhaps way too aggressive, and we may need to revisit them at some stage. Maybe budget is perhaps the right opportunity to. The question that I'm asking is, if growth is non-negotiable and if we have to boost public investment, should we not be cognizant of the fact that, okay, we may not meet the fiscal deficit next year, but let us allow ourselves some fiscal slippage, but let's boost growth? Is that a valid argument that finds favors with your government?
Yes, but finds favor, but fiscal deficit cannot be allowed to slip. And I think the finance minister, I'm not speaking for him, but
right.
The finance minister is seized of that challenge very much, because that is what has made a big difference to the Indian economy in the last few years. The deficit mounting on us, and then the government remaining as a mute spectator in a way, is not what we can afford to do this time, because the revival depends on so many indicators. Just as you would want to have everything given for the manufacturing sector, just as you wouldn't want agriculture sector to suffer, you also have to be keeping in mind every aspect of managing the economy in mind. Just
right.
as we said, monetary policy. RBI has every business to take care of that, and that is not an area in which the government talks. But that doesn't mean that it can afford to say, let the RBI take a call, we'll deal with the fiscal deficit the way we want. No, you can't do that. Every indicator is a critical indicator. And especially at a time when the Indian economy had reached the stage it had reached by the time this government came into power, now you have to be conscious of each one of the parameters.
But don't you think managing fiscal deficit to the last decimal point is an exercise in futility if you've just got to keep cutting public expenditure? Because to revive growth, perhaps the government has to move far ahead than the private sector will at this stage.
No, that's true. But then it doesn't mean that cutting public expenditure. It is more rationalizing them. The exercise about which I think the FM has talked about several times is there are a lot of overlaps. There are a lot of schemes under which funds are being allocated but which are not being effectively utilized. So our government is making sure that there is definitely a rationalizing on these expenditure, and therefore to that extent it will also be influenced by the thought of controlling deficits.
While we are talking about fiscal numbers, we've seen crude oil prices fall very sharply. We've also seen our import bill go down on that account. Is it not then the right time to take the foot off the pedal as far as gold import curbs are concerned? I'm sure you're flooded with requests like that, even though imports have gone up. But because
in fact, I did voice it to the FM earlier from the point of view of the gems and jewelry industry, also from the point of view of raising a question rather than suggesting a solution. Raising a question that by the curbs, are we losing more of what could have been a legitimate revenue? These curbs resulting in a hiked smuggling activity. And because of the smuggling activity, what could have otherwise genuinely come through the customs in this country, generating revenue also and duty, are we losing out? Due to the curbs, diverting the gold which is coming into the market, which could come through legitimate routes, going through smuggled routes, we trying to contain it. I raised this issue to the FM.
And what was his answer?
Well, he heard me out, and he's somebody who's very sharp who can,
So should we expect some relief for gold importers in days to come?
I honestly do think it is a serious issue of have we allowed the smuggling to, not allowed in the sense of deliberately.
Exactly, but
has it
driven
the buyers to a market which is not pleasant, which is not legal.
Your government has also been approached time and again by American e-tailers or the e-commerce companies like an Amazon or an eBay for formulating rules on e-commerce space. I know that's gathering mind space with you. Presentations have been made. How close are we to FDI and e-commerce and a proper policy there? And do you believe America itself is a divided house because Amazon wants something else and eBay stands for something completely in contrast?
I must recall when I was last with ET in the Mumbai discussion.
That's right.
This question was asked, the only question asked of me. my answer has not changed since then, because there's a lot of technology playing there. And this technology playing out, some customers have received it very well, some others have had issues with it. The brick and mortar retailers are also now getting onto that platform of, I may have a shop, but I still also want to have the benefit of, e-commerce.
Right.
So this is a very, very dynamic situation now. The government doesn't have to jump into it from point zero. We are watching it. But I'm not saying I'm inquiring, I'm looking into it, none of that.
But how soon, how close are we to a policy there?
Well, I can't comment. I can't even say tomorrow I'm coming up with a policy, I'm coming up with it in 1 month. No. But you can see the dynamics are changing very rapidly there. You, as much as you would have complaints about, e-commerce not serving them well, there are people who say, why do you want to curb it? Because it gives me,
That's
ready
right.
available. And there are also now moving fast such queries where people would say, my credit card which is issued in India is not acceptable for these e-commerce. Is this fair? Why should credit cards only which have international currency be acceptable here? The questions of all kinds are coming in. So we are at a go, probably going to have to look at so many issues belonging to different layers within the debate of e-commerce, but at the moment, no.
We're glad to be a facilitator. Thanks very much for talking to us now.
Welcome.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.